Hello everyone, I am Sri Widyastuti. In this great occasion, I would like to present my assignment about type of sentences, specifically simple sentence, compound sentence, and also complex sentence. So let's get started. However, before we go further to the types of sentences, it is important to understand what a sentence is. Here, I will remind you of that. A sentence is the basic unit of language which expresses a complete thought. It is a collection of words consisting of subject and predicate, or it is called as a clause. A sentence can consist of one clause, which can be made of only independent clause, or several clauses, which can be made of independent clause and independent clause, or independent and dependent clause. This combination of clauses is used to identify the type of sentences. Finally, don't forget the feature of a sentence which always ends with a period. Previously, we have talked about clause. Maybe many of us are still wondering what a clause is, so here we will discuss it again. A clause is a group of words with a subject and a predicate. And it is the rule that every clause must have a subject and a predicate. If it doesn't consist of those two things, it certainly isn't a clause. It is also important to note that there is always a finite verb in the predicate. Finite verbs is the verbs that usually get inflection following the subject of the clause. It is related to a gender, number, or the person. And after knowing that idea, so let's take a look to the example. Johnny found a cute dog while he walked in the park is an example of a combination of several clauses, or it is can called as a sentence. We can see it from the expression of the complete thought, the ending with a period, and there is a subject, or the doer in the sentence, which is Johnny, and there is a predicate, or the work or situation that is done by the doer. Then what about the clause? Let's identify that now. We can start identifying the clause, or how many clauses in the sentence. Begin with identifying the conjunction. And from the sentence, we can see a conjunction which is while. And we can conclude that we have two clauses in the sentences. Namely, the first clause is Johnny found a cute dog, and the second one is while he walked in the park. The first clause is called an independent clause because the thought is complete, so that it can stand alone, or it means we don't have to put any words or clause again to make the meaning of the sentence complete, while the second clause has incomplete thought because there is a conjunction which is while, so that it cannot stand alone. It still requires another clause to be called a sentence or to have a full meaning. So in this section, let's talk about the types of the conjunctions. The first one is coordinating conjunctions. Are the conjunctions that use to connect parallel clauses, or in other words, to connect independent clause and independent clause. And to remember that easily, we can use fanboys that stand for and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. The next one is coordinating conjunctions, which are the conjunctions that we usually use to connect unparalleled clauses, or in other words, they are connecting independent clause and dependent clause. The example of these subordinating conjunctions are like after, although, before, because, whenever, unless, and etc. You can see it in the slide. And there is one type of conjunction again, which is a relative conjunction. For example, like who, that, which, and etc. Okay, after knowing the concept of a clause, a subject, a predicate, and also conjunctions, we will talk about the first type of sentence, which is simple sentence. The features of simple sentence are: it only has one independent clause, it has complete thought or meaning, and it has no conjunction. And we can see from the examples here, the first sentence is the flowers looks very beautiful, and the second one is my friends and I take dancing class. To check whether these two sentences only have one independent clause, it means that we can only find one subject and one finite verbs in these two sentences. The first one, the subject is the flower and the finite verbs is looks. And for the second sentence, we can see the subject is my friends and I, and the finite verb is take. And again, to check whether these two sentences is just only one independent clause, we cannot find any conjunctions. So it is true that these two sentences is simple sentence. And the second type of sentence is compound sentence, which the features are: compound sentence has two or more independent clauses. It connected by coordinate conjunction, or as we called fanboys as before. And other feature that we can identify in the compound sentence is it uses comma after the first clause and before the conjunction. And let's take a look to the examples. The first examples is I really love my cats, but my sister does not like them. And the second one is I have an agenda this morning, so I have to wake up early. And in identifying these two sentences or break down these two sentences, we can first identify the coordinate conjunction, which we can definitely found the coordinate conjunction which separated the clause in these two sentences, namely conjunction but and so. And again, to check whether these two sentences have two independent clauses, we can check through separate the first clause and the second clause and omit the conjunctions. For example, the first sentence, I really love my cats, a period, and the second clause, my sister does not like them, and a period. If the separated of these two clauses still have meaning and express a complete thought, it can conclude that these two clauses is independent clause. And it also conclude that this example is a correct compound sentence. And it is applied also in the example of number 2. For the third or the last type of sentence is complex sentence, which the feature are: complex sentence has one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses, and it connected by subordinate conjunctions which connect between independent and dependent clause such as because, while, since, after, and etc. And another features is complex sentence use comma if the dependent clause is put in the beginning of the sentence. We can see this feature with the first example, which are: while he waited for the rain, comma, he ate some of his bread. And for the second examples, we don't use comma here because the independent clause is put in the beginning of the sentence. And to check whether these two sentences have dependent clause, we can identify the conjunction first, which is the subordinate conjunction. We can find while in the first sentence, and also we can find if in the second sentence, which means that the dependent clause which start with while and if cannot stand alone and still have another clause to make the meaning of the sentence is complete. So here we will do some practice in identifying some sentences, and we should classify these several sentences, 3 sentences, into a simple sentence, compound sentence, and complex sentence. But before that, I would emphasize 3 things or 3 steps that we can apply in classifying or identifying the sentence. The first one is to identify the finite verbs. The second one is identify the conjunctions, whether it has coordinate conjunction or subordinate conjunctions. If the sentence has coordinate conjunction, it should be compound sentence. And in other way, if the sentence has subordinate conjunction, it should be complex sentence. And the third one is identify the clause or how many clauses in the sentence through identify the subject and the predicate. And the sentence are, the first one, Hans and Mona got there early and they got really good seat. The second one, I met the man who sent the flower. And the third one, the letter was written by Kim. The first sentence is Hans and Mona got there early and they got really good seats. The first step to identify the sentence is identify the finite verbs. And we can identify the finite verbs in the sentence, which the first clause we can find got, and the second clause also we can find got as the finite verb. And as the second step, identify the conjunction, we can find a coordinate conjunction, which is and. And the third step is to check how many clauses in the sentence, because we found one conjunction, so we can see that the sentence has 2 clauses. The first one is Hannah and Mona got there early, and the second one, and they got really good seats. And we can see these 2 clauses as independent clause. And we can conclude through the features if the sentence has 2 independent clauses and connected by coordinated conjunction. So this type of sentence is compound sentence. And for the second sentence, I met the man who sent the flower. The first step, we can identify the finite verbs first, and we can see meet and send as the finite verbs. The second one, identify the conjunction. We can identify subordinate conjunction or relative conjunction, which is who. And the last step is to check how many clauses in the sentence, because we have one conjunction here in the sentence, so this sentence has 2 clauses. For the first one, I met the man, which is independent clause, and the second one is who sent the flower, which is dependent clause because it cannot stand alone. So with this picture, we can identify the sentence has 2 clauses, which is independent clause and dependent clause, and connected by subordinate or relative conjunctions. It can conclude the sentence as a complex sentence. And the third sentence, the letter was written by Kim. The first step, identify the finite verb. The finite verb was written. And the second step, identify the conjunction, which in this sentence we cannot find any conjunction. And then in the third step, to check how many clauses, we can totally see that this sentence just consists of one clause, and it is independent clause because we cannot find any conjunction in it. So we can conclude this is as a simple sentence. Before, we have talked about the concept of the types of sentences, and also we have done some practices. And in this slide, I just want to mention again things to remember in identifying the sentence. I would emphasize these 4 things. The first one is always check the finite verbs. The second one, always check the conjunction. The third, always check the subject and predicate to know how many clauses in the sentence. And another one is we can always check the punctuation too. I hope from that explanation we can get more understanding about the type of sentences, and I think that's all for me. Thank you.